And so, the birth of Godzilla was this Lucky Dragon number 5 incident. But what he represents is mainly just the unstoppable nature of nuclear power. You're going to hear me talk a lot about Lovecraft, and that is because I think kaiju are inseparable from Lovecraft, especially Godzilla. Just think about the formula of the film with the mad scientist Serizawa, who created something that is so awful that he basically loses his mind. That is an extremely Lovecraftian motif. And Godzilla is very Lovecraftian, a creature that is unstoppable, that is created by something that we don't understand, that is destroying all of the life and all of the things that we cherish and love. And it's hopeless, right? If we remember the 1954 film, it is not what the show period ended up being. It is very dark, it is very grim, and it's very disturbing. And it was a direct representation of the effects that World War II had on the Japanese people, specifically, obviously, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I am going to play this clip here. This is from the film. And I just thought that it was very relevant to the overall feeling of dread that this film has, and the representation that it has.
ゴジラは一旦装備へ逃れた模様であります。新たに山中さんの相当対策研究班が設置されました。この時間の主な項目でありニュースをご覧ください。
Always on to the next thing as far as the collection goes. But I feel like it's very easy for people to pass off kaiju films and the genre in general as popcorn flicks, brainless entertainment, but they have such a deeper meaning and a deeper parallelism to our society and to other societies and just to humanity in general and the things that we face in our day-to-day lives. So literal definition of kaiju is not giant monster, it's strange beast. Okay, it's a lot different than what we have come to believe it to be. And, we associate it with large monsters, but it can really be anything that is unknown, anything that is beyond human comprehension, even kind of the Lovecraftian. And just a little bit of an overview. So we're going to start off with Kong. Obviously, he's one of the earliest representations. Move on to Gojira after that. Talk about the different periods. Gamera will follow shortly after. Modern representations of Godzilla and other representations that I thought were relevant to the topic of it, basically reflecting cultural issues and cultural struggles. So, King Kong came out in 1933, directed by Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack. I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, honestly. King Kong was kind of a revolutionary film. It went on to inspire special effects creators like Ray Harryhausen. But there's a much more, I believe, deeper meaning to King Kong at the time. And that was going to be the colonization and exploitation of nature. Right? We're at a time period in this moment of our history where there really isn't a new great frontier anymore. There's really not that curiosity or that thing out in existence that we haven't really discovered, right? And there's a lot of different events that were leading up to this specific time in history as well, such as the Great Depression, So a lot of people suffered greatly during the Great Depression, and it was a time after the Roaring '20s that there was an awful decline. The Second Industrial Revolution happened pretty close to this time. The Tariff Act of 1930 also happened before this film came out. And the Tariff Act was basically something that the government put into place to increase taxes and tariffs on anything coming from exotic countries, anything coming from across the ocean, right? We're also at a time in history in the 1930s and 1940s, and in that time period where specifically African Americans are getting their first places in office, right? There's people that are fighting against segregation at this time. And Kong really represents that fear of the unknown and that fear of the other that we have. Not just the fear of the other, but also, as I mentioned, the colonization of nature. They go to Skull Island, which is undiscovered, and they take back something and they exploit nature in a way that it shouldn't be. And you have to remember as well that at this time there was a lot of awful effects that the Second Industrial Revolution was actually having on the environment. And I think that this is also a reflection of that. It's a reflection of our, I guess you could say, I believe it was Ian Malcolm said, rape of the natural world, right? And Kong's legacy really is that he kind of opened the door for a lot of different kaiju films and kind of made it synonymous with that idea that these kaiju could represent our own inner demons and our own inner struggles and the things that our society was facing at the time. And Kong has continued to be a very influential character. I mean, everybody in the world knows who he is. And leading up to our very next, which we all know and love, Godzilla, 1954, directed by Ishiro Honda. And this is during the atomic age, right after, 9 years after World War II ended. So this was a time when the effects of the war and the effects of Nagasaki and Hiroshima were still having a terrible effect on Japanese culture and the Japanese economy at the time. So there were these, I guess you could say, subconscious but very present fears that the Japanese had. And that did end up translating to film. Shortly after the war, most films and most media in Japan was actually monitored. It was controlled, censored, and they weren't allowed to put specific things into films if it showed that it was anti-American or if it showed that it was anti-government or anything like that. There were a lot of banned films about the war that were patriotic towards the Japanese soldiers in World War II. Fast forward to the incident of Lucky Dragon number 5. So, shortly before Tomoyuki Tanaka and Ishiro Honda started their work on the original Godzilla, there was a horrible accident with a ship called the Lucky Dragon number 5. And basically the United States was conducting atom bomb tests in the ocean, close to, I believe it was close to Hawaii. But they ended up conducting one that was rather close to where this fishing boat was. This was a tuna fishing boat, so they go deep into the sea. The passengers on the ship actually ended up getting poisoned by radiation. Hopelessness that was definitely relevant in the society at this time, and especially after the Lucky Dragon number 5. Now, as we transition to the Late Showa era, this was a time when pollution was a serious problem in a lot of countries, and including Japan. This is a time where a lot of people started wearing masks for the first time because the air was so pollutant that they couldn't really breathe right. So the Godzilla vs. Hedorah by Yoshimitsu Banno was actually a very politically charged film. It's something that Tomoyuki Tanaka actually hated. He hated this one, but a lot of the original people behind the original Godzilla didn't like this film, so it was very experimental, very hippie influence. But I think it's important to remember the strong themes of eco-criticism that are in this film. and to remember about Godzilla. This was the time when he had become a hero, where his job and his task was to rid the world of this pollution that was enormous monster. Now, Heisei Godzilla. This is my personal favorite era of Godzilla, and this is what I grew up watching. This is where I first started seeing films. Was back in the '90s. Biollante is by far my favorite. Right? Heisei Godzilla kind of took a 180. So the Showa era films, ending with Terror of Mechagodzilla in 1975, they just were kind of progressively not making enough money. They were just performing very badly, and so they put Godzilla to rest until 1984, when we got the return of Godzilla and the return of form. So Heisei Godzilla goes a lot more into